You wake up to the sound of hoofbeats and war drums echoing across the Mongolian steppes. Your first breath carries the scent of horsehair, smoke, and blood. Your father isn't just any warrior, he's the man who united the scattered tribes under one banner. The great Khan who commands 1,000,000 riders. The shadow that stretches from China to the gates of Europe. You're born into absolute power, but that power comes with a price written in conquest and terror. Your cradle is a felt-lined gur, but outside, the world trembles at your family name. From your earliest memories, you're surrounded by the sounds of empire. Messengers arrive day and night with reports from distant battlefields. Tribute caravans stretch to the horizon, loaded with gold, silk, and slaves. Your father's generals kneel before him, their hands still stained with the blood of cities. This is your normal. This is your inheritance. Your childhood is spent learning the two skills that matter in your world: riding and killing. Before you can properly walk, you're strapped to a horse. Before you can read, you know how to draw a bow. Your tutors aren't scholars with books. They're scarred veterans who teach you that mercy is weakness and hesitation is death. You learn that cities exist to be conquered, that people exist to serve or die, that the world is divided into two groups, Mongols and future Mongols. Your father appears in your life like a thunderstorm, brief, overwhelming, and impossible to forget. When he returns from campaigns, the entire camp transforms. Warriors who fear nothing cower in his presence. Enemies are brought before him in chains, begging for deaths that won't come quickly. You watch from the shadows as he decides the fate of nations with a gesture. He notices you watching. He calls you forward. You're 7 years old, barely reaching his knee, but his eyes hold the same coldness they show his enemies. He places a blood-stained sword in your small hands. "Choose," he says, pointing to 3 captured enemy commanders. "Kill one, and I'll teach you to rule the world. Kill none, and you'll never be worthy of my name." Your hands shake as you raise the sword. The blade is heavier than your entire body. The men before you weep and beg in languages you don't understand. But you understand their terror. You understand that this moment will define everything that follows. You bring the sword down. Your father smiles for the first time in your memory. From that day forward, your education becomes systematic. You learn the geography of fear, how to read the loyalty in a man's eyes, how to calculate the exact amount of brutality needed to break a city's will. Your father teaches you that empire isn't built on love or law. It's built on the simple understanding that resistance equals death. You study maps covered in red ink, marking conquered territories. Each mark represents thousands of lives ended, entire bloodlines erased, cultures reduced to memory and ash. Your tutors are the survivors of your father's campaigns. A Chinese administrator who watched his emperor executed. A Persian engineer who designed the siege engines that destroyed his own homeland. A Russian prince whose family was fed to dogs. They teach you languages, mathematics, engineering, and governance. But every lesson comes with the same underlying message: submit or perish. By your 15th birthday, you've witnessed the destruction of 12 cities. You've seen populations sold into slavery. You've watched your father's engineers divert rivers to drown entire valleys. You've learned that genocide isn't a crime when you're the one writing history. Your first independent command comes at 16. A minor rebellion in a province that forgot its place. Your father gives you 10,000 riders and simple instructions. Leave no one alive to remember what defiance looks like. You ride for 3 weeks across landscapes that still bear scars from previous campaigns. Burned fields, empty villages, skulls arranged in pyramids as warnings to future rebels. When you reach the rebellious city, its walls are high and its defenders desperate. They know what Mongol mercy looks like. They've heard the stories from survivors of other sieges. Stories of cities where the lucky ones died quickly. You surround the city and wait, not for surrender, for their hope to fully die. On the 7th day, they open the gates, not to surrender, but to charge out in a final desperate assault. Better to die as warriors than wait for the slow horror of Mongol occupation. Your riders cut them down like wheat before the scythe. The city burns for 3 days. When the smoke clears, nothing remains but ash and silence. You return to your father with the heads of the rebellion's leaders. He examines your work with the attention of a master craftsman. Clean, he says finally. Efficient. You understand the lesson. From that moment, you're no longer just his son. You're his weapon. Over the next decade, you carve your own legend across the known world. Cities surrender at the mention of your name. Kings offer their daughters and treasures before you even arrive. Your reputation spreads faster than your armies. You perfect techniques of psychological warfare that make physical conquest almost unnecessary. You send emissaries ahead with detailed descriptions of what happens to cities that resist. Most choose submission, those that don't provide object lessons for others. But empire comes with its own weight. Every night, you dream of the faces you've erased from history. Every morning, you wake to reports requiring more erasure. The world grows smaller as your domain grows larger. There are fewer enemies to conquer, fewer cities to burn, fewer peoples to subjugate. Your father ages rapidly under the burden of ruling half the world. The constant campaigns have left their mark. His hair is white, his hands shake slightly, but his eyes remain predatory. He summons you to his deathbed with words that echo across the steppes. The world is not large enough for eternal conquest, he whispers, but it's large enough for eternal fear. Rule through terror, and you'll never need to rule through presence. Make them understand that rebellion against one Mongol is rebellion against all Mongols. Make them understand that our vengeance has no expiration date. His death changes everything and nothing. The funeral lasts for weeks. Entire populations are sacrificed to serve him in death. The mourning is mandatory and absolute. But beneath the grief, you sense opportunity. Your brothers have their own ambitions. Your generals have their own loyalties. Your empire, built on conquest, now faces its greatest enemy, itself. The succession isn't decided by law or tradition. It's decided by strength, cunning, and the willingness to drown family bonds in blood. Your brothers gather their supporters, you gather yours. The steppes become a chessboard, where the pieces are armies and the stakes are everything. Your youngest brother strikes first, attempting to assassinate you during a funeral feast. The knife misses your heart by inches. Your response is swift and absolute. By dawn, his entire bloodline has been eliminated. Not just him, but his wives, children, and supporters down to the 3rd generation. You display their heads on stakes around your father's tomb. The message is clear. Family means nothing when the throne is at stake. Your remaining brothers choose exile over confrontation. They flee to distant corners of the empire, taking their supporters and their ambitions with them. You let them go. For now. The throne is yours, but the crown weighs heavier than expected. Your empire stretches across continents, but holding it together requires constant vigilance. Distant provinces test their boundaries. Vassal kings plot independence. Trade routes become smuggling networks for rebellion. You spend the first 5 years of your reign putting out fires. Each rebellion crushed. Each plot uncovered. Each threat eliminated with the thorough brutality your father taught you. But new threats emerge faster than you can eliminate them. The empire your father built through conquest requires constant conquest to maintain. Without new enemies to unite against, the Mongol tribes begin turning on each other. Without new plunder to distribute, loyalty becomes expensive to maintain. Without new terrors to inspire, old fears begin to fade. You realize the fundamental truth of your inheritance. Your empire isn't a kingdom. It's a machine that consumes the world to fuel its own existence. And you're running out of world to feed it. Desperate for new conquests, you turn your eyes toward lands your father never reached. The frozen wastes beyond the northern forests. The island kingdoms across eastern seas, the desert empires beyond the southern mountains. But these campaigns yield little. The northern wastes hold nothing but ice and death. The island kingdoms are protected by storms and distance. The desert empires offer only sand and defiance. Your armies return depleted and demoralized. Your treasury empties. Your reputation for invincibility begins to crack. And in that crack, rebellion takes root. The uprisings begin in the furthest provinces. Local governors declaring independence. Client kings refusing tribute. Trade cities closing their gates. Each rebellion, by itself, is manageable. Together, they represent an existential threat. You can't be everywhere at once. You can't burn every city that defies you. You can't kill every person who dreams of freedom. For the first time in your life, you face an enemy you can't simply overwhelm. The enemy is time itself. Your empire is too large to govern. Your armies are too scattered to concentrate. Your reputation is too dependent on constant victory. And victory is becoming impossible to maintain. You try to adapt, implementing new strategies your father never needed. Administrative systems to govern without constant presence. Economic policies to maintain loyalty without constant plunder. Diplomatic solutions to resolve conflicts without constant warfare. But these tools require skills you were never taught. Your education was in destruction, not construction. Your training was in conquest, not governance. Your inheritance was an empire built on fear, and fear has a half-life. The end comes not with a great battle, but with 1,000 small defeats. Trade routes that close. Tribute that stops flowing. Armies that desert rather than march to another pointless campaign. Your own generals begin negotiating secret surrenders. Your own governors start declaring independence. Your own people begin forgetting why they should fear the name of Khan. You die alone in a tent on the steppes where your father once ruled the world. Not from an assassin's blade or a rival's poison. From a fever contracted in a minor skirmish with rebels whose names won't be remembered. Your funeral is attended by a handful of loyal servants. No kings come to pay tribute. No armies pause their campaigns in mourning. No cities declare days of remembrance. The world your father conquered simply continues without you. Within a generation, your empire fragments into squabbling kingdoms. Within a century, your name becomes a footnote in histories written by your former subjects. The cities your father burned are rebuilt. The peoples he scattered find new homes. The cultures he tried to erase return from memory and exile. But the scars remain. In the genetic legacy carried by millions whose ancestors survived Mongol raids. In the empty spaces where great cities once stood. In the collective memory of what happens when empire becomes an end in itself. You were born as the son of the greatest conqueror in human history. You inherited an empire that spanned continents. You commanded armies that could reshape the world. But you learned too late that conquest without purpose is just sophisticated destruction. That fear without legitimacy is just organized terrorism. That empire without justice is just a pyramid of skulls waiting to collapse. Your father conquered the world but couldn't conquer time. You inherited his empire but couldn't inherit his moment. And history, written by the survivors, remembers you not as a great Khan, but as the beginning of the end of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. The steppes remain. The wind still carries the echo of hoofbeats, but the name that once made kings tremble is now spoken only by scholars and storytellers, and even they struggle to explain how something so vast could disappear so completely. How an empire built to last forever could crumble in a single generation. How the sons of the great Khan could lose the world their father had won.